Alrighty, guys, welcome back to another episode, Michael Labs Show, episode 269 of me, your host, Michael Labs. It's weird, every time I start an episode, I say my entire name. There's something about that seems strange. There's something about that seems very self-centered. But then I think about what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is a podcast where I sit down and I talk for an hour, 45 minutes, and you guys listen, and girls listen. And I just want to take like 5 minutes out before I get into the topics I want to talk about, which are pretty much more or less like stories this week. The first thing I want to mention is I just want to give a big thank you again to everybody who's new to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on my wild ride. Thank you so much for listening on Apple Music. If you're on Apple Music, make sure you go ahead and leave it a 5-star review. If you don't think it deserves a 5-star review, don't leave it a 5-star review. I'm not going to press anybody on anything. You give me what you think I deserve. If I deserve a 1-star review, then give me a 1-star review. In addition to that, if you guys could go ahead and if you're on Spotify, go ahead and follow it and also give it a review there. And finally, all of the platforms, Amazon, Google Podcasts, whatever it is, Amazon Music. If you guys could just subscribe or follow or like or whatever those functions are, that tremendously helps the podcast a lot. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and then obviously on YouTube. I've been getting a lot of traction from YouTube. I've been really I might just actually get into that a little bit going on in this episode. But I just want to give a big thank you so much to every single person who's been coming to the podcast. The growth has been amazing. I could see this thing there's no stopping this show. You know, the only person that's willing to slow down the podcast would be me, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep on posting. I was looking back at some of my archives. There was a period from January 2022 to April of 2022, where I didn't upload one episode. And, you know, I think about that. That's 16 episodes that I neglected. I just stopped doing it for a job that fell through. And, you know, it's been a solid 8 months now, and I don't regret any of that. The only thing I wish I could have done is continue to produce content for everybody, because that's something that I vowed to myself I would do. I don't regret it, but I do kind of get upset sometimes because I just think about where the podcast could be with 16 extra episodes. But at the same time, there was this weird feeling I got. I fell back in love with it. You know, when you're doing it weekly, you know, every single week, sometimes 2 episodes a week, you do sometimes fall out of love with it. And I think it's with that and everything. I think that's with the job. I think that's with the relationship. I think that's with, you know, passions. You don't need to necessarily take a break, but sometimes you just got to take a step back and look at it from a different angle. And I think that's very important, especially if you're a creative. And I know this is just a podcast, and I know it doesn't seem like a creative thing to do, and I know it just seems like anybody can do it. But I welcome somebody to come in and sit down and do a podcast for an hour every single week, no matter what's going on in your life. Find time. There's so many stressors that happen. You know, everything from editing your own podcast, from marketing your own creative project. And this isn't just a podcast. This is for anybody out there who's ever done anything that's outside of like a 9-to-5 thing. And, you know, this is no shade at a 9-to-5, but there is this, there are these struggles that are very unique to anybody who is a freelance artist, or if you have a passion project. And it becomes challenging because you kind of, just like in a lot of relationships that a lot of people go through, there's this time period where you just cannot stay away from the person. You're just always, and if you find somebody like I have in my life, that never goes away, which is absolutely amazing. Like that love and passion that you have for somebody never fades. And, you know, I think there's a lot of people out there who say like, there's this period in relationships where it's like the what do they call it? Like the phase of the relationship, like the Goldilocks period, where you're so infatuated with the person and you just love the person so much you can't go away from them. I think if that period subsides and that period goes away for a long period of time, I think you failed as a partner, because I don't think that's unique. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you can have that Goldilocks period with somebody that you love forever. It's hard. It's not easy. I think it's the same thing with everything. Like, it's hard, to maintain an amazing relationship. It takes a lot of work, man. It takes a lot of work on yourself. It takes a lot of work from the other person. It takes a lot of work to figure out your communication styles, your love language, which is something that if you asked me 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what are you talking about, love language? But it's a real thing. And you got to be vulnerable with people. It's an odd thing, because you go through your whole life and, you have family, you have friends, but especially family, you have a different relationship with them because they brought you into this world. So it's easy for you to be open with them. Hopefully your relationship was like that. If it's not, I sympathize for you. It must be hard, but it's difficult with a partner because you didn't know that person before. They don't know you. They only know you from what you tell them. And a lot of people are so scared of communicating the truth about who they are to somebody because you fear so much that person might leave you. And then that just makes the wall harder and harder and harder. And then maybe you fear that one day you're going to die without anybody there. And I think that's what happens in a Goldilocks phase, is there's no anticipation of a marriage. There's no anticipation of being buried next to this person. So you kind of just throw reckless to the wind, and whatever happens, happens. And because of that, there's this freedom that you have between somebody. But in my opinion, you can have that freedom and that recklessness forever in a relationship if you can figure out how to talk to that person, how to open up to that person, how to relate to that person, how to care for that person when they're not doing well, or how to, tell somebody, hey man, I'm not happy with this, or hey, I know we've been struggling here, but this is how I truly feel. And it could be scary because rejection could be very scary, and people don't like rejection, but it's one of those aspects in a relationship that if you can master, and if you can really work hard on, you can do anything. Like, you can conquer the world with somebody. Joey Diaz says this thing where he says, all it takes is 3 bad people, like savages of people, to take over the whole world. Obviously, that's a little hyperbolic. Obviously, he's a comedian, but it's true, though. Like, if you find a solid individual, someone who you love, you worship, and you care for, and they have so many personality traits that just bond with yours, you're unstoppable, man. You're unstoppable. And that's what I have. And that's, and I'm lucky to have this. I'm lucky to have this person who just vibes so well with me, understands what I'm going through before I even know what I'm going through, and can understand my flaws, and can understand I don't think I'm an easy person to date. I haven't dated that much. I've only ever been in 2 relationships, and I don't think I could date me. Like, it's got to be hard. I'm like almost neurotic. I'm just everywhere at all times. I'm constantly thinking about things. Like, it's kind of fascinating. When the thing is with the podcast is it's only me, right? So an episode only goes out if I find time to sit down and I talk for an hour. With that being said, my episodes go up on Tuesday every single week. So right after the podcast goes up, I have this feeling of, oh my God, I got to put up another episode. And it's an overwhelming feeling. Even if I schedule time, like on Thursday, I'm going to sit down and do a podcast. Until I have a podcast done, I'm constantly just in my head about, dude, I need to get this podcast over with. And because I don't want to be an interruption to someone else's schedule. Like, I don't want to be an interruption to her schedule. I don't want to put something to the back burner because of my podcast, but I know I have to do it. And it's this weird thing. And like, getting back to the creativity thing, like, you really got to have a passion for it, and not just a passion. You got to have this ability to just bite and just bear down, because there's going to be times like I'm never happy with anything I do. And like, in that's part of the podcast too. Like, every day I finish an episode, I'm like, oh my God, no one's going to listen. But then every single week when I get the numbers, I'm like, oh wow, thousands of people have listened again. So I must be doing something right. So it's so hard to it's just, you never feel like you've accomplished anything. I mean, I went from like 30,000 views on YouTube probably about a month ago to about 100,000 now, probably 105,000 views on YouTube. And I always wanted to get, 6 figures on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. And when I got it, it didn't feel anything. Like I just didn't, it was like, yeah, that's cool. 100,000 people, but it's so hard for me to like visualize 100,000 people listening to my podcast and, having tens of thousands of listeners on audio. It's just, you never feel like you've accomplished anything. And it can be defeating at times, but, I was listening to, Aubrey Marcus and, I think it was, I'm going to go with Aubrey Marcus and Aaron Rodgers. And they were talking about that, like that exact feeling of just feeling you've never done anything in your life. And then because you're right on the verge of being like nihilistic. Like, does anything have any meaning in this world? If death is the only way out, why should I have to do anything? I think Albert Camus says suicide is the only way out of this life, or suicide is like the overall. I want to look it up because it's a very powerful quote. Albert Camus, suicide quote. Yeah. Let me pull it up. Okay. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterwards. These are games one must first answer. What else? Thoughts of suicide. Yeah, that's suicide. But it's, it's a fascinating question. Like you kind of go like, well, what's the point of life? Like, what is the point? Why do I do anything? Why do I put out a podcast? Why do I go to work? Why do I try to get a nice house so I can live in? Why do I want to build a healthy relationship? Why am I creative at all? And I think I was listening to Albert Camus. That would have been impressive. He's dead for decades. I was listening to Aaron Rodgers, and I was listening to Aubrey Marcus, and Aubrey Marcus quoted somebody. I forget who it was one of those Greek philosophers. Basically saying the whole point of life is to constantly be building something, to be chasing something. And when I first heard that, it doesn't satisfy me. It doesn't make me go like, yeah, I guess that is the point of life. But that's because I've grown up with this idea that I need to have a finish line with everything. And I don't know if this is like an American thing. I definitely think it's a Western world philosophy. Because I think in a lot of Eastern cultures, that's not exactly what they think. If you just look at like Asian cultures versus Western cultures, there's a lot of individuality here in America and Western culture. If you look at the Eastern culture, it's much more about the family. It's much more about the family unit, the business, the society that you're around. Here in America, it's not that way. We are very individualistic. And I think that philosophy idea of it's all about the journey doesn't jive well with Americans because we go, what's the result? We want to see something in our hands. We want a new roof over our head. We want our hands on a different wheel of a car. And I think that's broken. I don't think that's the way to feel fulfilled in this life. I think the way to feel like you are doing well in this world and this satisfactory feeling, which is a feeling I don't ever feel like I'm wandering aimlessly through this world besides in the realm of creativity. But I think if I can adjust my way of thinking, which I'm starting to do now, if I can adjust it to be like, hey, you know what? It's sitting down and doing the podcast. It's sitting down and editing the podcast. It's sitting down and getting 5 clips for TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. That is the meaning of the podcast. The numbers itself are not the meaning of the podcast. The money to be made on the podcast is not the meaning of the podcast. Because the first 3 years I've done the podcast, I wasn't making money on the podcast. So why did I do it? And the only answer to that is I did it because of the journey, because of the feeling to check off boxes. And I think if you can extrapolate that into your whole world, I think there's the overwhelming sense of doom and anxiety can subside a little bit. I truly do. Because if you are so wrapped up in this idea that I'm going to get married to this person, you could completely ruin the entire relationship. Because if you make that the ultimate goal, you will look over the little things. You will look over not unloading the dishwasher, even though she didn't ask. You will overlook, man, I should have confided into her instead of just keeping it to myself. Because you put that marriage, the first thing, you put that up there as a physical destination. But in order to get to that, you got to go through the journey. And those events, confiding into your partner, emptying the dishwasher even when you're not asked to do it, taking out the trash, going to CVS to get ice cream for her even though she doesn't want that or she's not even asking for that. Those make you feel better than that marriage, because that marriage should be expected if you do all those things. And I think that's what happens to artists. To take this all the way back to the beginning, I think that's what happens to artists. I've seen it with Taylor's family members. I don't want to say names or point fingers anywhere, but I've seen it with these people and even my family members. So even just artists in general, where they have this idea for a painting, and as they go through the painting, that's when they feel accomplished. When they put down a base layer, and then they put down a second layer, and then they start adding the little figurines, and then they start adding the landscape. They start adding the depth, the color, the acrylic, whatever it is. I'm not a painter, but those are the feelings of fulfillment. But then most artists, when they're done with everything, they get the painting and they look at it, they're like, this sucks. I messed up there, I messed up there, I messed up there. If you can change your mind to be like, the end result's not the important part, but it's those little moments of success. And I've been trying to remap my life out for those things. For example, I am planning an awesome birthday party for Taylor. She doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't listen to the podcast, so she won't hear this unless someone sends it to her, which curse you if you do that. I'm so excited to get it, to do it, to get it together. And then when it happens, that's going to be amazing. But it's these little moments that lead to it that I think are the most exciting. It's, another example is you see it. I've been working out in the gym on weights for about 10 years now. And it's fun. It's fun to get stronger. It's fun to look bigger. It's fun to get a six pack. All that's really fun. It's very fulfilling. But it's the day in and day out over, 3,650 days, working out 98% of those days, where you go in, you get a crazy pump, you feel good, you're working out hard. Those, if you enjoy those days, the end result is guaranteed. But if you constantly obsess about the end result, you can overlook those days and be like, I could take a day off here because I'm going to look like this. Or I can eat this because I'm going to look like this. Or I can have beer tonight because I'm going to look like this. You got to get that image out of your head. Yeah, you got to have goals. I'm not saying don't have goals, but you got to stop obsessing over the end result and just obsess about the daily steps that it takes. Getting 8 hours of sleep, 98% of the time. Eating 200 grams of protein, 90% of the time. Eating well-balanced diets, high protein, moderate carbs, moderate fat, doing that 6 days a week. Doing these things, progressive overload, that's going to get you to this. Guaranteed, 100% of the time. 100% of the time, that is always going to get you to this end result. But if you only think of this end result and you don't think about those individual days, it's 90% you're going to get to this. Still good odds. But I also think that you're going to fall out of love with the journey. If you fall out of love with the journey, you're never going to get to the end result. And I think you see that happen with a lot of people where they start something, they become hyper obsessed with it, they love it, but they don't find a passion in it, and they fall out of love. They burn out real quick. I don't really know exactly what I was trying to articulate there, but basically what I was ultimately trying to say was there's a real power in being an artist and creating something. And if you can symbolize that process, that journey from everything to the marketing, or if you're like a photographer, traveling, getting the right camera, getting the right setup, going in during the right weather patterns, getting the right models. If you can fall in love with those tasks, you can do anything. You can do anything. And I don't think it's a coincidence that most people who are the most successful individuals in all of the world, whether it be Elon Musk in terms of electric cars and spaceships, or whether it be Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant in terms of putting a ball into a hoop, whether it be Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, they have fallen in love with the process. They have taken the process and they make it as efficient as possible, as clean as possible, and they make it a priority. And if you make it a priority and you do it every single day, you're guaranteed to get results that you want. And I think that's what I was struggling with the most, is when I was studying for my job and I wasn't producing content. Because on the surface level, you tell people that, they go like, well, yeah, it's for a job. Like, that's more important. Nah, I don't think so, because I was failing myself. And you can only fail yourself so much before you don't trust yourself anymore. And just as important it is to trust other people and build boundaries with other people and build relationships with other people, if you fall out of trust with yourself, if you don't set boundaries with yourself, if you don't prove to yourself that you're capable of achieving things, you're not going to do anything with your life. Because then how can you accomplish anything if the person that you are and the personality and the character that you've built, you don't even trust that person anymore, because they've tried so many things, they've done so many things, and they just fall apart each time. You can't. If that wasn't you and that was somebody else, that was an employee, you wouldn't trust that person. Understandably so. That's, I think, what really was pulling out my heartstrings the most, is I gave up on something that I really liked doing. I fell in love with the structure, I fell in love with the process, and I abandoned it for something that I didn't even know I liked, or I wasn't even sure I wanted to do. You know, I got caught up in it. I have to do this. This is part of life. You know, the thing you do in life is you go out and you get a big boy job, and you whatever, you do 9 to 5, and you do that 5 days a week, and you just kind of try to find time for vacations, and you do it for a few years, build up a little nest, and have a couple children, and those children, you raise them, you struggle with them, you fear for their life, and that's how it is. But that wasn't my path, and I don't think that has to be your path. And I know Taylor and I decided that's not our path. We are setting up our situation, to be more or less like, we do what we want, when we want, how we want. And I think a lot of people look at that, and there's two opinions. The first opinion is out of resentment, because I think a lot of people look at that and they go like, damn, I want to do that. But they can't do that because they've made choices in their life that don't allow them to do that. Or the other choice is, wow, they're lazy, or they're doing it the wrong way. And either one's fine with me, because at the end of the day, that's the life that we've decided to take, and I'm so excited for that. We were watching The Bachelorette, last week, and they were in this episode. They were in Belgium, and we were just looking at the buildings, and we were like, dude, we want to come here, and like, we can. Like, there's nothing holding us back. We can do that. I DoorDash. I have plenty of money saved. I'm doing fine. She's working from home now. And, like, we can do that now. And I think that's so powerful. I've always thought about, like, people who are forced to grow up so quickly, you know? And it's a complicated thing to talk about for a few reasons. I think the biggest reason is because a lot of people who are put in that situation, it wasn't by choice. And I can't really talk on that. But then you run into people who they talk about a life that they want to live, a freedom that they want to obtain, financially, one, health-wise, a second one. I mean, I've done a little bit of everything. I was a personal trainer for a little bit. I've seen so many people who have everything in their life put together, but their health is lagging big time, and they would trade everything for their health. I've seen it in finances. Just in my little stint as being a broker, I saw people who were in incredible shape, very smart, but financially they were struggling, and they would have traded everything to be better off financially. And I think that's what ends up happening is you want what you don't have. And I think when you have to grow up at such a young age, or not even grow up, but you make a decision at such a young age that you're going to be a loan officer forever. So you go out with your $50,000 salary, you put down a 20% mortgage, or, you know, a 3% mortgage for first-time home buyers, and you get this house, and now you have a, you know, $1,500 mortgage that you got to pay each month for 30 years. You kind of put yourself in a situation where you're like, well, maybe I didn't love that. Maybe that's not what I wanted to do, but I don't really have a choice anymore. That's kind of what I'm doing. And that has always been very scary to me. And it's almost sometimes a flaw that I struggle with, because I remember so many times in my life where I just felt completely naked in a room full of people that were fully clothed. I put up a TikTok and a YouTube short basically saying there's this trend that goes around where it's like something my therapist once told me. I was in therapy for about probably 3 months, probably 3 or 4 months. And it, to this day, is probably the best decision I've ever made. Probably the best decision I've ever made in my life. And it was during a period where Taylor and I were on the rocks, and I really had to go someplace to talk and be listened to and not be judged and get honest feedback with somebody who didn't know who I was. And anyways, I put up this joke on TikTok. I put up this TikTok, and it said two things my therapist once told me. Michael, have you ever thought you were gay? I'm not gay. I'm very, I think I take on a lot of feminine personality traits. I'm not trying to be like sexist here. I'm just like overall speaking, I feel like I'm pretty feminine with me, like as a person and my personality and my character. I think it's very feminine. I don't feel comfortable. I mean, I can, I'm like an iguana. I can blend in with anybody if I need to. I prefer not to, though. You know, honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's nobody's the best for me. No women, no men, just me, Taylor, and that's it. That's where I function the best. And then there was this Second thing she asked me, she said, Michael, have you ever been screened for autism? I get goosebumps just thinking about it. It was the first time in my life where I could sit down and I felt so clothed. Like I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel odd. I didn't feel like the kid in the class who didn't know where they wanted to go to school. I didn't feel like the kid in the class who, when they read, they skipped over R's and W's. I didn't feel like the kid in the class who, everyone go play basketball and I had everything inside out. I didn't feel like the kid in the class who couldn't talk because they were scared of being made fun of. I didn't feel like the kid in the class who, when the teacher asked a question, I had to lie because my real answer was crazy. I felt normal when she asked me that. And I said, no, I haven't ever been screened for autism. And I've never even thought about it. I never even thought that maybe I am on the spectrum. And then, before that, she asked, she said, you sound and you speak like somebody who has ADHD. And I was like, well, that only makes sense. I could have told you that going into it. Like, yeah, most likely I'm definitely attention hyperactive disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. ADD's attention deficit disorder. The hyperactive is added. That's the proper one, ADHD. And it changed my life, and it changed Taylor and our life, Taylor and my life forever. I remember I went home and I sat down with Taylor because at this time we were back together during this period. And I was like, Taylor, I got to tell you something. Because usually I don't really talk about therapy too much because, a lot of it is tools. I developed tools, like especially for like me and my ADHD. I had to develop a tool to be able to I remember when I first got put on Adderall, the thing that it allowed me to do was to think, which is crazy. But for so much of my life, in conversations, in friendships, in whatever it was, if somebody spoke to me, I felt like I had Tourette's in the sense that I feel like I had to say something. I just had to say something. And when I was taking that medication, which I did a podcast on, I'm not on it anymore. I took it for about 6 months to a year. I don't really know. But it allowed me to let something sink in. I would go quiet and I would think before I spoke, which is a tool that I have developed. I've developed that tool where I think now before I speak. Before I would not do that. And I was a loose cannon. I would say anything. And if you listen to this podcast now, you're probably like, it doesn't seem like you fixed anything, but I did, and that's, those are one of the things where I think where a lot of people who struggle with, I don't like the word mental illness because I don't feel like ADHD is a mental illness. I don't think anxiety is a mental illness. Depression, I think, is a little bit different. I mean, I know anxiety is a mental illness, but I think anxiety is a fascinating one. I think it's a trait in a modern day human that doesn't do anything good for us because we live in a first world country. But I remember when she told me that, it changed Taylor's relationship and my relationship forever because I came home and I told her, I said, hey, my therapist wants me to go get tested for ADHD. And Taylor's somebody who's worked with a lot of people who are on the spectrum, a lot of people with, they're called neurodivergent. That's what the proper PC term is for people who are like on the spectrum, people who have ADHD or people who have behavior issues or split personality. We call it neurodivergent. And if you're not neurodivergent, we call or neurotypicals. I think everyone's a neurodivergent up to a point, and I also know what I just said is something that like the ASD and neurodivergent community hates hearing. They don't like hearing like everybody has a little bit of something, but I do think a lot of people have it. I don't think everyone does. I'm not, I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't go out and say that. But it allowed her and I to change the way we communicate with each other forever, because she understood that when we were communicating or we're arguing or whatever we're doing, just having a regular conversation, she now knows that I have ADHD. And because of that, sometimes I will say something that I don't fully mean at all. I just said it because it was like a knee-jerk reaction. So times where I forget my tools and I don't care, I don't think about what I say before I say it, she can understand he probably didn't mean that. I would let that slide, or maybe I'll give him a few minutes and then I ask him what did you mean by that? And I could be like, oh my God, I did, like, that's not what I meant at all. Because that's something that happens all the time with our relationship, where I will say something and sometimes hours will go by and days will go by and she'll bring it up to me and be like, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. And I'm never like, oh, that's what I meant. Like, that's what I said. No, it's like, I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, and it was also very validating, because I remember saying that so much as a child, where I was like, dude, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. Like, or sorry, teacher, I didn't mean to, say that in class, or I didn't mean to do that action in class. And, so many times people just don't believe you. Like, they just think that you're trying to be like an asshole or like a pain in the butt, but I wasn't. It was something I couldn't control. And I also learned like the value for me as somebody who does have ADHD. It was very important for me to work out hard and for me to develop a very balanced, healthy diet for me, which is a low ketogenic diet, low carb diet. That allowed me to, one, reduce my blood spikes, reduce my sugar coming into my body, which overall flattens me out mentally, which is good for me. And when I work out really hard, it sounds dumb, but I feel like if I work out really, really hard, I almost like run the ADHD out of me, which I know is not possible because I have a backed up dopamine, serotonin receptors are like not clicking on all cylinders. That's what ADHD is. But it was powerful, man. And it took our relationship to like the next level. And it's one of those things that I took out of therapy that, people ask me all the time if therapy's worth it. And I think the answer is no. For some people, no. I don't think so. I think for some people it's absolutely worth it. I could get into like the whole world of therapy and like it seems like the people who are getting the most therapy are the people who need it the least. And I'm not trying to be insensitive, but like even me, like I needed it, but I didn't need it like some people. Those people who need it the most don't have access to it, and it's very difficult to see. Because as the therapist, your goal is to make money, right? That's why you went to school, and those people who need it the most tend not to be overlapping with riches, so they can't afford it. I was out yesterday dashing, and on the way home, I was driving, and I saw this guy talking to a pole. I looked down, and he was digging at the dirt, and he was talking to the dirt. And we have like this little homeless encampment that's near intersection where we live, and you just think about these people. I'm very sympathetic to these people, and I always feel like society has failed these individuals. This is where like I've become very liberal and very libertarian, and a lot of my conservative friends kind of, go like, like I left their little party. I don't agree at all. 100% disagree with a bootstrap mentality. This mentality that you should just work harder, or you should just pull your boots up, strap your boots, and just keep going forward. People can't do that. Some people have been brought into this world with a brain that is broken. Schizophrenics, depression, anxiety, hundreds and hundreds of other things. And sometimes you get brought into this world to a family that can afford that. They can afford to take care of you, give you the medication you need, give you the therapy you need, surround you with the things that you need to allow you to function as normal, as socially acceptable as possible. Sometimes these people get entered into a world where their family has no money. They don't have the tools to send them to facilities that can take care of them. They don't have tools that can help this person live a life where they fit into society. And then it just gets worse. You know, as a woman, I think about this all the time, and it's so scary to me. I'm not a woman. I'm a dude, and I'm a big guy. Like, I'm 6'1". I'm like 220. I can handle myself in 95% of the situations. As a woman, man, you're just hoping that guy in front of you doesn't want to rape you that day. That scares the hell out of me. I mean, that scares me to no end, and I don't know if it's because of my parents and them being police officers that I am overly scared, but that scares the crap out of me. You were just kind of hoping when you go and get gas at 9:30 at night, or when you go take your kid on a walk, you were just praying that person, that man who you saw walk past you or drive by you, doesn't decide to turn around and rape you or kill you, because that's all you got. If he wants to do that, he will do that. He will force himself on you. He will impregnate you and then maybe even kill you. That's how women have to interface with the world. And that is one of the things that just scares the hell out of me. I think that kind of the person I am today is very much because of that. Like, I was brought up by very, very powerful women. Like, I was brought up in a patriarchy. I always struggle with this. Like, my mom is single-handedly the most powerful person I've ever met in my life. And the most powerful woman by far. The most powerful person I've ever met. I mean, this person was brought up in a family that had literally no money. Lost her father at, I think, 25, which is my age. That's my age, dude. And became a police officer as a woman, which the percentage, this was in the early 1990s, late 1980s, where women weren't police officers. And she's risen all the way to the top, the chief. It's incredible to watch. And then my grandma, on both sides of the family, my dad and my mom, just worked their asses off. My mom's mom raised 8 kids pretty much as a single mom. I mean, not really. Her husband was there a lot, but I never met my grandfather. He passed away from cancer. He was a World War II vet. So I was brought up in a family, and my dad's obviously amazing, but he was even brought up by his mom. Like, his dad was a CIA agent, so his dad was out wherever, Soviet, Nam, Korea, wherever it was. So he was brought up by women too. And I think that's where I get like my overwhelming sense of respect for women. And it scares the crap out of me, man. Like, I have this weird thing with Taylor where it becomes controlling. Like, I think society would tell me things like, you shouldn't be this controlling with your woman. But I am, dude. Like, I tell her, like, if you go anywhere, please don't go until I'm home. Like, please don't go anywhere. And she understands. There's a few places, certain times of the day where I'm like, you can go. And it has nothing to do with, like, me being insecure. It's just me. I get goosebumps just thinking about it, because I know the evil exists in this world. And I'm not one of these people who can just turn the other way. Some people can do that. I'm not one of those people. I'm constantly obsessed with like the worst possible event happening. And I provide it like the highest percentage. And if it doesn't happen, it's a relief. If it does happen, I'm prepared. And I think back to what I was saying, like you get these people who get brought into this world, especially if they're women, and, you know, a tragic event happens to them, like rape, for men and women. They lose somebody in their family tragically, a father, a mother, a grandparent, a guardian, a sister, a brother, and they were already came into this world with a brain that wasn't functioning at a normal level, and then it breaks again, and you get dealt a deck of cards that has been perfectly aligned to have your life fall apart. So every time I walk and I see these people, I can't help but feel for them. And when I saw this guy talking to dirt, I'm a bad person. I laughed. It was funny. I'm not going to sit here and act like it wasn't funny, but it was funny. And then my second thought was, this guy should have access to help. But there's also this part of me, and this is probably the part where I think I get the most pushback from, where I go like, that person should have the right to do that if they want to do that. Who am I to tell another man what they can and can't do? And that's where I think one of my most liberal ideas, which I think one that probably gets the most pushback from most people, is suicide. I'm a proponent of somebody wanting to take their own life. I know when you say it, it sounds crazy. Like, what do you mean? You want people to kill themselves? I want people to have the option to have full autonomy of their bodies. And I don't think you could put a cap on that. Which a lot of people would respond, well, suicide is it's not even a cap. It's just you can't do it. It's like, that's not true, though. And I think we also see this from, and I know, again, I'm saying it, I think we see this from a very westernized point of view, POV, where a lot of cultures, for the longest period of time, suicide was considered good. Like, I'm just going to look it up. Cultures that worshipped suicide. A religion and suicide. Who's the god of death in Japanese? Many have death deities. Many have incorporated a god of death into their mythology, as death along with birth is among maybe not that. What cultures have suicide? Suicide in Japan. Anyways, it used to be a thing where, like, I know like Japanese samurais. It was a sign of respect to take a sword and put it through your body, you know. And I'm this is one of those viewpoints for me where I get a lot of pushback from, and people completely stop listening what I have to say, which I understand. But I'm in full agreement with like what they do in Sweden or Switzerland, where they have suicide chambers. It's a hard thing to talk about, but I think if you go into this life and your goal is to become successful, and you have tried so hard so many times, who am I to tell you that when you get down and out completely 100%, you can't choose to take your own life? Who am I to tell you that you can't consume alcohol? Who am I to tell you that you can't consume heroin, you can't consume mushrooms, you can't consume whatever, cocaine? I'm not God. I don't want to play God. I don't ever want to play God. And I think suicide is another situation where who am I to tell you what you can and can't do with your body? And the issue with suicide, I think most of the time, and this is really controversial, the reason why it sucks is because it's a selfish thing. When someone takes their life, you think about yourself. Not all the time. I know for me, I've lost a few friends to suicide, and my first reaction is like, fuck, man, what were they going through? What were they going through? And it makes me sad, and and then immediately it goes back to me, like, what could I have done for them? It wasn't about me. It was about them. But I make it about me. Now they're not in my life. I can't be with them. I can't be with them. And I think that is just one of those aspects where it's so convoluted and so complicated. But I truly think that if you choose to take your own life, it's not up to me to choose. It's not up to me to tell you can or you can't. Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's complicated. I think if you're somebody who believes in freedom, I think freedom doesn't stop anywhere. And I know, like it's against the law to kill people, but you still have the freedom to kill people. But there will be an exchange for your freedom. If I choose to go out there and kill somebody, it's over with for me. I'm going to be locked up. I made a choice to take away their life. Now my life's going to be taken away. I want to pull up this one article real quick. I know there's a lot of things that I could get into. Guard. This guy right here. This is from a month ago. There's a lot of things I want to get into. But I just didn't do it in this podcast just because there's a lot of news articles out there in the world right now, whether it be Ukraine or Taiwan or Brittany Griner or just a lot of things happening. But I don't really want to talk about those. I kind of wanted to be more personable with people, to just that stuff is fun, but it's not life. It's fun to talk about, but it's not life. And I will do it in the next episode. Next episode might be with Taylor. Hopefully it's with Taylor. It's my goal is to get Taylor on the podcast again, because hopefully we're going to go away for about a week to go to a beach with my family, which I'm very excited for. We just got to figure out stuff for with Taylor and stuff like that. We're going to celebrate my birthday and everything. I'm turning 26 years old, which is absolutely insane to me. I'm so old. I'm so old. I'm so impressed. If I could go back in time and tell myself, if 12-year-old Mike could see me now, 12-year-old Mike would be pumped. He'd be like, yo, dude. First of all, he'd be like, yo, that girl you date, she's a smoke show. Because I used to do this thing when I was very religious where I would go to bed every single night and I would pray. I would pray to God. I'd be like, God, please let me find a girl who's pretty, nice, likes me for who I am, I could poop around and I could play with. Literally every single night. I would pray every single night because my parents would come in, they would sit at the foot of the bed, and we would pray. We would do Hail Mary, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, will be done, deliver us from evil, blah, 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 stuff like that. And then we would say, my mom would be like, who are you thankful for? I would say, or Jesus, can you please watch over Mom, Dad, Grandpa Jack, Grandma Mary, and we would do a list. And then right when my parents left, I would turn over, look at the wall, put my little 12-year-old hands together, 10-year-old hands together, and be like, Jesus, let me find a smoke show to date. Someone who I like, someone who likes me, someone who's really pretty, somebody who's very kind, and they have a beautiful personality. Just kidding. At 12 years old, I probably didn't care about the personality. But I just remember and now it's happened. I have that. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. This is just a crazy news article. I'm just going to read some of it. This came out June 28th of 2022. I don't think anyone's really been talking about it. Ex-Natzi Guard convicted over 3,500 counts of accessory to murder. Former Nazi concentration camp guard Joseph Schuetz 101 years old. 101 years old. Do people who were in the concentration camps and the Nazis who were killing the Jews and the mentally retarded and anybody else, pretty much, like, those people are still alive. Still alive. Dude, humans are crazy. Like, we're barbarians, bro. Like, we don't ever get better. A German court has found a 101-year-old former concentration camp guard guilty of being an accessory to thousands of murders and sentenced him to 5 years in prison, the latest in a string of prosecutions of ex-Nazis in the country. The centurion, over 100, who has maintained his innocence throughout his months-long trial in Neuruppin State Court in East Germany, was convicted Tuesday of more than 3,500 counts of accessory to murder. Prosecutors accused him of being an accessory to the murder of thousands of Jews, political prisoners, and other minorities persecuted by the Nazis at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp from 42 to 45. You willingly supported this mass extermination with your activity, a judge told the man Tuesday as his verdict was read in gymnasium in the town of Brandenburg an der Havel. Let's see if they got any quotes from him. He said, I don't know why I'm here. He said that on the last day of his trial. What else? Yeah, I don't know. It's just wild. I mean, 1942, he's 101 years old, so 22, 78. So 1922, he was born. He was born 1921. He was born in 1921, so he was 20... He was 21 to 25 years old. It's crazy, man. That's just so wild. Whenever you think about, like, that's why whenever you think about, like this idea of world peace, like, it's never going to exist. Like, it simply won't exist because it can't. Because our human brains, us as people, like, we other people. And when you other somebody, you can do whatever you want with them. You can kill them. You can maim them. You can burn them alive. You can put them in camps like the Chinese do with the Uyghur Muslims. You can capture their country and murder everybody like they're doing in Ukraine. You can do anything. You know, there's a genocide, I think, happening right now in Cambodia. I think it's Cambodia. Francis Ngannou put it up on his Instagram, and then I put it up on Facebook, and they took it down off of Facebook. U.S. returns 30 stolen antique artworks to Cambodia. No, it was thousands of Taiwanese may be trafficking victims in Cambodia. Nice. Violence. It was by Francis Ngannou. I don't know. I can't find it. But it was wild. It was people of the same race, just different cultures, just beating each other and killing each other and murdering them. And it just makes you think, man, people are, like, legitimately capable of anything. Humans, there's no limit to the violence that humans are really willing to take. And I think that's very important for people to realize, is that no matter how much you want peace, it's very unlikely to happen. And I think that's why you got to be very protective of what you have, who you are, and who you love, and who you care about, where you put your energy. Because this is all you got. It's all you got in the world. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. We did just about an hour. A little bit over an hour. Not by much, just by a few seconds. Thank you guys so much. If you've made it this far, you guys are, like, true podcast fans. I don't even make it that far in podcast. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rating on Apple Podcast, and tell a friend about it. It helps a lot. In addition to that, I hope you guys have a beautiful week. Hope you guys have a beautiful August. It's fall time. I'm so excited for that. And I'm hoping next week I have my lovely girlfriend on the podcast. We can sit down and talk about the chronicles of our apartment versus mice and how she saved a mice after she wanted to kill it and how we lost power and just an eventful night and day at the residence of Taylor and Michael. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I'll see you guys soon enough. Peace out and see you. Have a blessed week. I'll see you next week. See you.